Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Michael Bunker Radio Podcast Thingy number 6. I think that's where we are. Number 6. Sounds about right. Well, welcome, everybody. Just got back from wife and I had to. I promised I was going to stop coughing into the microphone. Wife and I had to run up to Eastland, Texas, which is kind of northeast of here, to go get the car registered. She's got a trip to make next or later this week, and so we want to make sure everything was on the up and up. So we went up there, and then afterwards we met a friend of mine at there's a little town east of there called Strawn, Texas, and there's a restaurant called Mary's that is probably one of the best chicken fried steaks I've ever had. I mean, it is really, I highly, and this is like right off of 20, maybe a couple miles north of I-20. So if you're ever going from Dallas or Fort Worth going west on I-20, stop in Strawn, Texas, and go to Mary's and get a chicken fried steak as big as your head. And they got a small, medium, and large. Most people order the small because it's more than most people should eat. I ordered the medium, and it was really good. So anyway, so we drove up there, and then we drove back. And so I didn't even get into the office today till 2:30 or so. And I still got a lot of work to do, but I'm trying to get 2 of these podcasts in a week, and I fell away, when I was down in Austin, and so I'm trying to make sure I get it done. And so here we are. Here we are at the podcast. It is, I don't even know what day, Monday-ish, Monday the 30th. Got one more day in January. Wednesday is our first Wednesday work day here in the community, and what we do on the first Wednesday work day is everybody in our community takes that day and we go somewhere to somebody's property and we work. Like if somebody has a fence to put up, or we have a neighbor who been enclosing a porch so they can put a wood stove, we'll go over there and work. Tomorrow we're going to be working here on my property, and I think we're going to be not tomorrow, sorry, Wednesday. Well, I think we're going to be trying to work on our huge water project that we're working on, and one of the things we're building is a stone tower, so we can have a elevated gravity feed water supply to the cottage and to the gardens. All right, so that's what's going to be going on Wednesday. Sent out my normal email, see if people had questions, and of course I got Forbes on there making joke questions, so I got to get through those by ignoring them. Scott trying to be like Forbes. So Jason Howard said, how about a brief history of the Waldenses? That'd be very, very difficult to do in this format. I can do a very brief history. And one of the problems with the Waldenses, if people aren't familiar, Waldenses are a tribe. Not really a tribe. It is a group of people that live in Europe, and they're historic. They're called the ancient Waldenses, but basically it's a group of people that were Christians who lived in the Alps, and they were basically mountain people, and there were really extensive attempts to genocide them, to destroy them through the centuries. Some of them like multiple times worse than anything that happened in if you watch Braveheart or something like that, Scotland or Ireland. For over about, I'm going to say 1,000 years to 1,400 years, there were about 2.5 million of the Waldenses were murdered, and there were extensive official attempts to just wipe them out as a people. And so I say one of the reasons it's difficult to study them. I've read probably 20 books on the Waldenses, and some of them are very, very good. The movie of the Waldenses is still yet to be made. My book, The Last Pilgrims, is based loosely on a modernized version. So I took the story of the Waldenses and brought it into the U.S. The reason it's difficult to kind of get down to the bottom of what what the truth is so much of it, as he says in Braveheart, history is written by the victors, but the Waldenses themselves were not really big on recording their own history. There are a couple of histories that were written by Waldensian pastors, um, and um, and then a lot of that changed during the Reformation, because the Waldenses joined with the Reformation and adopted some Reformation doctrines and worship elements, and um, to do so kind of even covered up some of their own history. And so it takes a lot of work. You have to read a lot of books that are written by people that were trying to kill them to find out what they really believed and all that. The general story is this: that the Waldenses were Christians that were living in Rome, second or third century. And when the persecutions got really, really bad, a bunch of them fled into the Alps, right between Italy, the Alps of Italy, the Alps of Switzerland, and the Alps of France. And they multiplied there as a people. They started new communities. They spread. They lived in very, very difficult terrain, and so they were pretty much left alone for hundreds and hundreds of years. And then, during that time, it is our belief that they basically, that was the storehouse of kind of the pure Christian doctrine. And so they would send out ministers or preachers to different areas. And there were many attempts to wipe them out by the Papists, Romanists, and other groups that tried to wipe them out. Sent armies into the Alps to just kill everybody, women, children, babies, etc. And then the Reformation doctrines were basically received from the Waldenses by different groups in Switzerland and in France and Germany, which is where we get Calvinism and Martin Luther and Zwingli. So there were traveling preachers that were going around handing out pamphlets and things like that. And then, after around 600 to 1000 AD, there was huge, large-scale attempts to kill all the Waldenses that multiplied into the 1600s. I mean, there were the entire armies of 75, 100,000 soldiers were sent into the Alps to kill everybody. And there are stories, eyewitness stories written where 7 Waldenses would face off against 7,500 of soldiers and win. And that sounds crazy, but they used the mountain. They knew how to use the mountains. It would actually make a fantastic film. But then around the time of Queen Elizabeth, there were other large-scale attempts to wipe them out by the Catholic countries, and so the Waldenses, they were actually run out of their lands, completely run into Switzerland, and stayed there for not very long, and then went back and had a campaign where they took back their valleys, and then after that they joined with the Reformation, adopted a few Reformation doctrines that earlier they didn't partake in, and those are particularly the Sunday being the Sabbath, and baptism by sprinkling. And so prior to that, they kept a Saturday Sabbath, and they did meet and fellowship on Sundays, the Lord's Day, as the church does today, but they didn't call the Sunday the Sabbath. And they were accused multiple times in official documents by the Roman Catholic Church of being heretics because they maintained the Saturday Sabbath. And they also baptized by immersion, which the Catholic Church didn't do, and most of the Protestant Reformation did not do. And then there are groups that broke off or began with them and then spread. And so you had the ancient Paulicians and the Albigenses and the more um, the Baptist groups, Anabaptists, and all of that. And so that's kind of a quick history. And I'm not citing anything because I've got tons of books here, and I'm just kind of giving you off the top of my head. All right, that was Jason. Heidi says, how do you deal with raising a family and juggling your career with being a husband and your beliefs on parenting being a husband? I deal with it poorly, and I think I answered this question in one of the earlier shows, but I deal with it very poorly. I try my best and it's one of the things I think I talked about in the first or second show that I'm probably the most sorry about is that I didn't spend more time working with my family over the last 10 years. I spent a lot of time writing and in both nonfiction and fiction and preaching, and I spent a lot of time, early time in my children's life traveling, and I probably would do all of that differently if I could. However, I'm coming up on 25 years married to Danielle. That will be February 22nd is my anniversary, and I will have been married half my life. But I've tried to do my best, and it's a constant challenge, and it is juggling. And my wife is wonderful and probably one of the best persons. All right, and so hold on just a minute, refresh here. I know there was a question here about non-political things that most people would disagree with me on. Let me see if I can. My computer's really, really slow. Okay, the next one was Darren said, you may have answered this a million times, but which of your books do you suggest I read first? If that's kind of all the information that I have is that somebody hasn't read my stuff and they're just coming in and want to know which one to read first, I usually recommend Brother Frank because it is a complete novel. It's not part of a series, and it is universally liked. I think it's got two and a half hundred or something like that reviews. Still has a 4.7 review rating. And I meant to tell you guys. I'll get back to that. I did WD-40 my chair, and it still squeaks really bad. And then also, and you're gonna have to get used to this because when summer comes or even spring, it's 73 outside, but it's kind of warm in here right now. Is I have to run a fan because I don't have air conditioning or any thing like that. I'm gonna turn my fan on, and if it's just real bad, I'll listen to this. And if it's just really, really horribly bad, we're at about 13 minutes. If it's just horribly bad, then I'll try to find some other way to muffle the fan. But it's kind of warm in here at the moment. And anyways, going back to which of my books to read, I usually tell people Brother Frank. If you were looking into, you didn't mind getting into a series, then I would definitely read Pennsylvania or Wick first. If you like Vonnegut and you don't find Vonnegut difficult to read, if you like the style and you like his kind of satire, then Osage Two Diamonds is a great book. But if I just have to flat out tell somebody, okay, read this book, then I tell them Brother Frank. And then, depending on what somebody likes, I may give them a better or a different suggestion. All right. Sarah Thompson says, name something not political that you believe that most people will disagree with, like a pet peeve, like I hate white socks. I got a bunch of them, and so I'll run through some here, but there's a lot of them. People would probably disagree with me on most of the things that I believe, even that are not political. I hate ketchup. I hate the concept. I don't have a problem with the original concept of ketchup because ketchup was made as a way to preserve tomatoes using fermentation, and it was more of a vinegary type of product. I hate the fact that they took something that was good and good for you and they turned it into sugar, corn syrup, tomato paste, and that people put it on everything and they ruin absolutely good food by putting it on there. But that's just I don't like William Faulkner. I can't read. I've tried and tried and tried and tried and tried to read William Faulkner, and I don't like it. I don't. I don't think it's good, and I know that most people would disagree with that. Just in general, talking about ketchup, I think sugar, white processed sugar, is probably one of the biggest health destroyers in the world. I think it's cancer food. I try my best to try to stay away from it, or at least cut way, way, way back. I think it's probably pretty horrible for you. I don't like Islay scotches, so I like Scotch, but an Islay Scotch is a very peaty, smoky, very to me difficult. I know people like it, or it's kind of like a hipster thing now too. But I don't like peaty, real heavy smoke of scotches. Let me think. Things that I think most people would disagree with me on. I think Russian literature is the best literature in the world, and that American literature is probably not even third, um, with a few exceptions that I really like. But I think Russian literature is so far and away above even second place that it really deserves its own thing. And then I like British literature quite a bit, and then American literature is probably third. I don't like fantasy in the genre or movies or books. Only fantasy I like is Fantasy Island. That's probably it. I don't like the concept of fantasy, and this was one of the questions that we had at in Austin during the sci-fi panel is what is the difference or how do you and my answer was that to me sci-fi um, has its root in something that's real. You have to explain things that happen. In other words, if you have a magic sword like a lightsaber, then that's actually a device and it's using physics and it's using science. There's actually they don't do it in the book, but one of the conceits of that genre is that you could take that thing and you could like run the science back and you could figure out how it works. So even though most people don't explain their science in science fiction, and there's nothing wrong with creating new types of devices that don't yet exist, is that there at least is a head nod toward that this thing could exist in the real world. It's not just magic that just exists for no reason. And I know a lot of people like fantasy, and they don't like other people having opinions. But I don't like fantasy for the very reason that it's. I look at fantasy like a lot of atheists and agnostics look at religion, and I am a religious person, but I know atheists and agnostics look like it's this system and it just is, and there's no reasons, even though that's not true. But that's the way I look at fantasy. I don't, nobody can pull this sword out of the rock, but the special person. To me, that leaves just way too many questions on my mind, and so I can't get into it. Are these trees start walking? Some species of tree people, or it just to me, and there have been fantasy books that I've read, and some I liked Stephen R. Donaldson's Thomas Covenant Unbeliever. But of course, I liked it because it was this idea that it was this guy's what was going on in his brain. He had epilepsy, and so this world was like this fantasy world that was in his brain. And so at least if there's some kind of at least hand-waving explanation that this is why this stuff happens. And that's one of the reasons I don't like most of the books that are written, genre books that are written with, 14-year-old angsty teenager gets superpowers and saves the world. I talk about that a lot in Hell in the Sea. And I know most people won't agree with me. So, and I'm against public education. I don't like it. So, there's a list. and and any of those things, if you want to know why, I guess you can give me that as a cue for another show. I'm going to mute for a second while I cough. So I have a way to actually keep from coughing into the microphone. There's a mute button. And I've been working on Spanish. I think some of you follow me on Facebook know that I hit 20% um, fluent on Duolingo. I'm using two systems kind of at the same time. I'm using Duolingo and I'm using Mosa Lingua. And both of these, I think, or at least one of them was a suggestion of Chad Woolley. And so and they work good together. I'm doing both of them, so I'm trying to keep them both juggling and both going. And I'm hoping to do that for a full year. I'm hoping I get up to enough fluency that I've taken Spanish. I think I talked about it in an earlier show for most of my life, and I've been able to operate in Mexico and other places very, very poorly, but enough to get by. But I really, really would like to be fluent. And then if it works and I can do it for a year, then I'm going to use the same systems to try starting on Russian, Lord willing, next year. So that's what's going on. I've been working on my Spanish. I'm doing a lot of reading. Still working on a commentary on Genesis that is going up weekly. I mean, I put up a new part weekly. Those of you who are on my Christian Facebook page are getting the links for those regular sermons, and that will be most likely, Lord willing, be a book. I'll probably wait till I get the first 10 chapters done, and that'll be a book length book, and put that out, and then do that probably 5 times to, if I can, if I'm alive. It's going to take a long time to go through the whole verse by verse commentary on Genesis. I had some questions on email or private message. And one of the questions that was on Facebook that I'll have to really, really get into sometime. I don't really have time today to do it. But how do you determine the truth? What system do you use to not be fooled by the left and the right and these propaganda mills and fake news, and even a lot of the mainstream news sources are fake, or they put out very propagandized, slanted pieces. And one of the biggest problems we have is that we live in a world today where sociopathy, being sociopaths, is epidemic. It's almost everybody at some level. And because of that, you have a lot of people with no real self-doubt, no self-examination, and so they actually believe that their political point of view, which has been around forever, the left-right thing's been around a really, really long time, and that is the inviolate truth, whatever they think about those things, and then so anything that's not that is basically heresy or blasphemy, and so you end up with this very hostile situation. And if you disagree with people's foundation or the foundation of what they consider truth, then you end up with a lot of really great hostility because people have no empathy. And so when you have a system where there's no empathy, where there's a rampant sociopathy, then and people actually believe that their particular worldview is the truth. It's not because they see it that way or it's based on preferences, but it is in other words, they've created a moral system, a religious moral system based on their worldview. Then you end up with some dangerous things. And so and if somebody comes up and says, this is my religious system, I think that this is what God said, then I perfectly understand your behavior. Your behavior becomes understandable to me. What I don't understand is generation after generation of really the most ignorant people. And by ignorant is not a pejorative. I mean ignorant by the people that are the least knowledgeable about both history and the history of politics and how propaganda works, how did anything like that. And so they have the least amount of information. They adopt the political worldview of their surroundings or their parents, unquestionably, and then they adopt it as a very angry, dogmatic system. And so, for example, your left and your right. I meet too many people today on the left and the right who don't understand the principle of the fact that you believe what you believe because there's a system in there. There's a system of either morality or based on how you think things work. And the other system is the opposite of that. And there should be some tacit agreement that it is the opposite, and that means that those people have adopted a different value system, and they see things differently. And so there should be some understanding that you don't expect a Republican, if you're a liberal, you don't expect a Republican to take office and to do the things that you want him to do. He's going to do the opposite of what you would do if you were there. That's completely understandable. That's exactly what happens in a binary system. And to see people outraged and and this happened during Obama's time, outraged and completely hysterical that somebody is daring to go into political office and to implement their agenda based on their worldview. And so you add on to that both sides have now inculcated in their own system that their own system is the moral one and the other system is the immoral one. So we're good and they're evil. And so then what you're seeing when you see somebody do something is not wrong, it's evil. It's not from a different worldview or a different position. It's actual tangible evil. And if you try to explain what I just explained to either side, then they'll just scream louder and they'll say, but it is evil. It is evil. Killing babies is evil. Banning Muslims is evil. And so there's you have a profound ignorance of world history, of the way that this type of system works, and then at the same time you have people that are demanding direct action. They're demanding that we go to a direct election of officials, and, so there is no protection then for your shibboleths, the things that you think that are inviolable, because the mass will be moved by money and power, and that's what we're seeing, and so it doesn't go to the answer of how do you find out what the truth is. Well, to me, what you need to do, and I got into this today on Facebook, and it's just laughable to me. It's laughable to me, and it was laughable to me 8 years ago, that people, first of all, they follow a pattern. There's this person who I didn't want to won. That person is evil. The things they're doing is evil. The Constitution is mine, not theirs, and therefore what they're doing is a violation of the Constitution, and therefore it is a complete threat to our entire world. Dogs and cats falling from the sky, firing cities. Everything's going to be bad. We have to do something. We have to do something, and it's this just hysteria that builds up. And then when you watch how these people gather information or news, they are gathering it almost uniformly from their own pet propaganda mills, even if that's CNN, even if that's Reuters, and they are ignoring anything that doesn't, because you never see them post something that's like, oh, okay, well, this explains the thing that I was shrill about 5 minutes ago. So they never come back and correct their own errors. What they do is they're constantly on the hunt for anything that validates the fact that the other side is evil and I'm not evil. And this happened 8 years ago under Obama, and you just switch the sides, and it's the exact same thing going on right now. And so to determine the truth, you have to be able to admit a few things. First of all, that you are not the measure. You are not the canon. You're not. You're not the canon of what is truth and what is not truth. You're not the canon. In other words, you're not the scriptures. You're not the law. And anything that disagrees with you is then evil and wrong. But that we are dealing in opinion about what will or won't bring about the greatest good for the greatest number of people. And so then the second assumption that adults make is that they are wrong. Adults make this, they live in a kind of an understanding that it is very likely that they are being hoodwinked, they're being tricked, or they're being lied to, they're being manipulated, or that they are just finite, fallen people with limited resources and limited understanding who are very likely being plied to react in a certain way or for a certain reason for the benefit of people who have figured this stuff out. That type of self-doubt and self-examination is absolutely necessary for adult behavior. Because if you don't have that, if you have this sociopathic kind of assurance that you are, sitting there besotted in your own righteousness, you are the final arbiter of truth, or what you think is, or your system of belief is, and regardless of how that fits in historically, because of the fact that you're surrounded with people that say the same thing, then you're going to end up with a lot of problems. Apologize for that if you discerned a break there, but had a neighbor came by. I'm a little out of breath now. Neighbor came by to drop me off some firewood. So, anyways, going back to what I was saying. So, you should start with some type of adult understanding that what we're dealing with are political opinions that are supposed to inform how we want to live, and that there are going to be people who are good-hearted or reasonably good-hearted people who think differently than you. And the next thing you have to do is try over the next 4 or 8 years to educate yourself about history. These same arguments have been made over and over and over again. Go study Winston Churchill. The arguments that were being made coming into World War II, that were the same arguments. You had a left party and a right party, and they were arguing about who was going to pay for what. Were we going to have a socialist system? What do we want to do with Germany? And there were the same accusations as people are evil and this and that. And then you go back to Queen Victoria. You can go back here in America to the earliest arguments in the federal papers and Federalist Papers, and this is just a continuum of opinion about how we should live. And the difference is that today, because of intellectual entropy and a lot of things, we really have the most ignorant generation of people, or a couple of generations, who are the most shrill, the most hysterical, the least respectful people. And they are looking at, if you go back the last 10 years, 15 years, they are looking at everything, every single issue, only through this prism or this, I don't know what you want to call it, this filter that silences anything that as immoral that disagrees with that position, and everything is taken to its ultimate. So nothing is just bad, It's like it has to be the worst thing ever, And so, and nobody ever has to apologize. Nobody ever has to change their opinion, and it's because we are a nation of juveniles, And so, to find truth, you have to be able to honestly, first of all, examine your own biases. Let me give you an example about some of the issues today. I'm against the what's so-called Muslim ban, which is not. I'm against it. I don't think that that's the best way to accomplish the task. I'm against a border wall. I was against it when Obama was doing it, and I was against it when Bush was doing it. I was against the Patriot Act when Bush did it. I was against Patriot Act 2, and the thing is that you examine your biases, where you're coming from, and then when you go read something, do so with a jaundiced eye. Look at it critically, and actually ask yourself, how is this being used to manipulate me, to make me think something that may not be true? So once you've bought off on every assumption, and the worst of every assumption, then you've created a whole new thing that has no real connection with the actuality of the thing, and then you're making new decisions based on that information. So I'll give you an example. A friend of mine on Facebook today said something about humans will overreact if given the opportunity. And there were a couple of jokes, and I made a joke. And this guy gets on there, and he's like, I should just read it. I should just read what he said. Give me just a second, and I'll pull it up. And it goes to prove the point. Because there's like 15 different assumptions that have already been made that are not based on anything tangible. They're based on the worst interpretation of the data that can possibly be made. And what am I looking at? Hold on. I got to find this post because I don't want to misquote this. I'm being gracious here. Given the opportunity, people overreact. I think that's absolutely true. And so this guy is like, what is the exact measure of reaction to a coup of the government by white supremacist dictators? Because, I'd hate to overreact to that. And so he's working on this. His basic foundation is that what's happening right now in politics is that this is not kind of a wacko or a little narcissistic guy who became president who's trying to implement the policies that got him elected, even if you don't like them. But it is a coup, which is fundamentally not true, of the government, and so this is just poor sentence structure, by white supremacist dictators. None of that is true. None of that is true. And so when you find one guy who happens to be an advisor to the president who has said things that the left has determined is white supremacist or racist, because racist and white supremacy to these people are the same. You can't just say I disagree with it. You can't just say, well, I think that this is dangerous. I don't like this guy's point of view. I don't like his ideas. But this is exactly the point. You overreact because you've accepted the worst interpretation of every single piece of data, and now you're making decisions, life or death decisions for you and your family and everybody else, based on the. And I saw the same thing when Obama took office. He was a Muslim communist, and everybody who said those things had their little pet articles they went to that proved their point in their mind. It's this tiny, tiny mind of ignorant, profoundly ignorant people who, with zero empathy and with a serious sociopathy, who are now the people that are squealing the loudest. And so the first thing you need to do is read information critically, even information that you agree with. When you see an article like the one that came out that everybody's posting from medium.com, first of all, ask yourself, what is this outlet? Is it a propaganda mill? Is it just a blogging place where anybody that you don't know can post? Is it, and it doesn't mean you accept everything from even something that you think is legitimate. You still read it critically. And then you learn how masses are moved by what techniques. Okay? So when I want to write a propaganda piece that's going to make people believe a certain thing, I will use as many facts as I can. But they will be interpreted. Those facts will be interpreted through a particular scheme, and then you utilize those facts to bolster opinions or speculations that are completely unsupportable. And then so you're building a case, right? And then you say things like, this heavily sourced article that says that Obama went through the whole process of becoming a Muslim. And then there's this. This is a fact. This is an absolute fact. He was being interviewed, and he said, my Muslim faith. And then the guy corrected him, and then he's like, "Oh, no, my Christian faith." Now, if Trump had done that about anything, this very same guy would be a part of that article. That would be a part of their argument. And so there's no empathy, there's no understanding. And so what they're doing now is, and they've been doing it for the last 10, 20, 30 years, is when I can get both sides of the system, it's like two legs. When I can get this one to go down and this one to go up, and then I can get this one to go down and this one to go up, I can move this thing anywhere I want it to go. And it's just, and for anybody that has done the work, or so you go out and you read both sides, you read them critically, you challenge things, you admit that there are things that you don't know, that there are facts that people put out there, that you admit that you've been fooled before, admit that you've believed fake news, or and then go and try to find an article or articles, doesn't matter where you find it, that refutes what you claim to believe. Go find an article that refutes it. In other words, if they're saying this is a Muslim ban and it's just an attempt to do blah blah blah, it's a racist attempt to discriminate against Muslims, fine. Write that down or get that in your memory. Note the article, and then go find the other side's explanation of that. Doesn't mean you just believe it, and it doesn't mean you disbelieve it. Just find out why there are people who don't agree with you. And don't dismiss their point of view because you don't want to believe it, or that you think that the source that they're citing is not good, or because your side has done a good job of already providing a apologetic to answer to their thing. So, and this is the way that politics works today. There are professionals, tens of thousands of them, working on the Republican and the Democratic side, whose full-time job is to provide an apologetic for a particular statement, a particular piece of news, a particular argument, and their job is to not only find evidence and facts that they can use, but also to provide an answer to those statements. So if I come out and I say the Pacific Ocean is made of mustard, and I've got these scientific studies that I can point to, and I got these eyewitness accounts and all that, I'm also watching, and I have people, hundreds of people, who are very smart, and they are waiting for the response. And when you say it's not mustard, it is grape jelly, and this is why, then I go and I analyze their response to their claim and refute it back into my claim, so that no matter what happens, if you're on my side, you're going to get every piece of an apologetic to continue in that system. You're going to get the argument, you're going to get the refutation of their argument against my refutation, you're going to get the refutation of that refutation of that refutation, and that's how you keep people enslaved, mentally enslaved in a system. And then they'll never look up and realize that both sides are working for the same people. They're doing the same thing. All you have to do is ask yourself: have you seen a Facebook post accusing the Democrats or the Republicans of hypocrisy? The whole definition of the useful definition of hypocrisy is that they are doing something or saying something that they are guilty of themselves. Then you just turn that on its head if you want to know the truth, which is an admission that the other side is now doing the same thing. So if I accuse you of slapping me, and I slap you, and I say it's because you slapped me, and you say that's hypocritical because you're complaining about me slapping you, but you slapped me, only reasonable people will pan back and go, they're both slapping each other. They're both doing it. And the difference between an adult and a child is an adult has the ability to go look and be against something they are doing or have done, and to be sorrowful for it. So, the stuff that the Republicans were doing against the Democrats that was wrong, 8 years ago that they're doing now. You can tell the difference between an adult and a child is an adult goes, no, it was wrong when we did it then, and we're sorry, and we're not going to do it again. And then you have the other side that looks at it and goes, no, it was wrong when you were doing it, and we're not going to do it. You can't both agree it's wrong and both keep doing it. And that's what's going on. So I didn't mean to get into another little rant. But that's how you find out the truth of something is, and I'm not saying that you're going, this is a little t truth. You're not going to absolutely discover. A lot of times you're just not going to know. And that's what you have to be willing to do is not react or overreact to things you really, really don't know. I've always said for years and years and years that the most gullible, the most easily used people are people that are moved by their news. So they don't have a foundation system of beliefs that determine their behavior, but they are moved by their news. And so I said this morning, this was exactly what happened under the Republican leadership or Democratic leadership. Trump's going to announce his Supreme Court nominee. And I'm just telling you right now, if you're on the left, that guy is evil. He's Hitler. That guy or girl or woman is evil, is wicked, is wrong, it doesn't have the qualifications, is the most unqualified candidate ever, and most likely is a racist, and most likely did a bunch of things wrong. And the reason I know that is because that's the talking points that will go out. And there will be evidence to support any and all of those arguments. And at the same time, on the right, this will be a tremendously qualified person who has done all these good things, is going to save all the babies, is going to save our guns. And that's the best, because those people have done their homework. They will have their talking points. They will have their refutations of the other side's arguments, and they will sit there and go at it. And the dumb people on the left and the dumb people on the right are just going to trumpet whatever it is their side tells them to say. And very few people are going to have any type of ability to see this has been going on for a very, very long time. And almost none of it on either side is true. And the truth is still out there. All right. Who are your literary heroes? Solzhenitsyn, Alexander Solzhenitsyn, which I recommend. Right now, if you want to know what's going on in the world right now, read Solzhenitsyn, Gulag Archipelago. I would suggest you read Tolstoy, who's wonderful, Turgenev, who's wonderful. Those are all literary heroes. I like Hemingway a whole lot. I like F. Scott Fitzgerald. Not a whole lot of modern people. There are a few, and I think I want to get into that on another show. And so I may save this question because I have a whole thing I want to talk about what I consider good writing and bad writing, or acceptable, or what's the word, like adequate writing. So there's all that. Let me look back real quick and see if I've got any more questions that have come in. I got off my page, so now I've got to go back. And again, I apologize for having to step out for a second. I did try to pause it so that I could go out and get some firewood, which I hope I'm going to need, or I hope I'm not going to need. But I'm glad to have it in case I need it, I guess is the point. All right, y'all. So I guess I'm going to go. I think that's it. Get your questions in for the next post, the next podcast thingy. You can always email me at bunker2k@hotmail.com. You can get on and hey, at the end of this video, towards the very end, it's going to flash up and say, subscribe. There's a circle with my head in the picture of me with holding a cigar. Click on that. You can subscribe to my page. Please do that because once you get like a certain number, I don't know, it's 1,000, then you get like special bonus stuff on YouTube. And you can also contact me on Facebook, facebook.com/offgrid, just /offgrid. And you can private message me or email me or whatever. All right. Okay, everybody. Good to talk to you. Glad to see you again. Hopefully.